Asia Corbett, welcome to the RevAmp podcast show. We're absolutely delighted to have you on as a guest here today. For those people who don't already know you, just maybe take a minute to introduce yourself, your role, and a little bit about the company that you work for.
Yeah, so I am head of revenue operations at Postal.io. We are an experience marketing platform with a marketplace of gifts, physical gifts, electronic gifts, and virtual events and experiences to accelerate your pipeline and delight your prospects and customers. It sounds very salesy, and that's why I'm not in sales. I'm in operations, but I head up revenue operations there, and I am focused on really supporting our go-to-market team so that they can do what they do best, which is bring in more revenue. I've been there for about a year now, and my background is pretty heavy in operations. I have been in roles where I do a lot of data analysis, so I have that too under my belt, but really like bringing this operational process-driven mindset to revenue operations is what I'm all about. And so I'm really excited to be doing that at Postal and sharing that with everyone else.
So a couple of things before we get into the nuts and bolts. From what I understand, and maybe not everybody would know this about you, you're a huge heavy metal fan.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that's not obvious from your LinkedIn profile. What is it that took you into heavy metal?
Yeah, so I can take you all the way back to my childhood when I was about 11, and I watched School of Rock with Jack Black. And right. I was like, I want to be in a band. I want to be in a rock band. I want to play guitar. And from there, I just started listening to music. Like I got into AC/DC. And as I kept researching or like looking for new bands to listen to, it just kept getting heavier and heavier. So like I got into Atreyu and then Lamb of God, and then more into the underground like death metal scene. And so just ever since then I've been listening to that. There's something about the musical element of it. It's not the screaming, it's not the vocals, it's the guitar, it's the drums, it's the bass, and how it's kind of all comes together. And it can be very melodic actually if you've never listened to death metal. So I've been listening to it for like probably 15 years.
That's awesome. I have no idea what the segue is from death metal into revenue operations. I'm not that smart, but somehow we'll find a way. Maybe by the end of the podcast, we'll know what the commonality or the pattern is. So tell me, over at Postal.io, you've probably faced a few challenges in your kind of go-to-market operations. Maybe let's start at the beginning and understand a little bit about the prerequisites of who a good revenue operations person is. I know that when we spoke previously, you kind of hit me with this curveball of it's not what you think it is. What is the preconception, and then what is your take on that?
Yeah, so I think there is this idea that if you want to go into revenue operations and be successful, you need to have a very strong technical background. If you look at job recs, postings, you see SQL, must know SQL, must have experience with Tableau, and must have like 6 years of Salesforce experience, all of these technical requirements. And I do not believe that's true. One, because I've never used Tableau. Not that I couldn't learn it, but you don't need it to be a successful, helpful, supportive revenue operations person. What you do need is flexibility, adaptability. You need to be able to learn quickly. And the process and project management skills, I think, are very undervalued. They're not highlighted in these areas. It's like, oh, do you know how to do SQL and do a data analysis on our data set? It's important. Don't get me wrong. I think that you should be able to at least understand how to get that information if you can't actually do it yourself. But those to me are less important skills than being able to design a project, because guess what? Building something in your CRM is a project. And so you're going to need to know how to start it, where to communicate milestones, how to put together business requirements and technical requirements. And then if you have to build it, you can build it, or you can give those to somebody else and they can build it. But that's really important. So yeah, that's.
I'm gonna jump in with a question there. Is there a difference in your mind between project management versus process management? How would you differentiate?
I think they're very similar. I think project, when you think about project, it kind of has a start and an end date, and process is ongoing, right? Like I talk about this a lot because it's the first one that comes to mind and it's the easiest one. Is like your inbound lead routing process. That doesn't have a start and stop date. You're always going to get in leads. They're always going to come in, need to be scored and then assigned and then worked, and then they go into the funnel. Whereas if you have a project, like let's build our lead routing system that has a start date, you have your process, you design what the automation looks like or whatever tool you're going to use, then that's it, that's the end. But the process still goes. So that in my mind, those are different. But you have to be able to do both. They're very similar. You have to be able to think about something from conception.
I'm gonna play it back to you or bounce it back to you. So when I think about process management in relation to your role, which is revenue operations, process management is the idea there that revenue is never a finished or complete state. Like you're always trying to achieve, generate, execute revenue. Right? So therefore the process is always ongoing because there's always like a flywheel of learning, optimized feedback. So the process never ends, but the projects are milestones within the process where you set things up, you get them to work, you connect them to other things. So for me, from what you've said, the process is the umbrella, and maybe project management are the pillars or the columns of individual things that keep the roof on that house.
Yes, I like that actually. I like that the projects and the milestones within the process. That's a very good way to look at it.
So being that process management is really important to you from everything that you said already, then what's the difference between kind of being good at that or excelling at that, and maybe where does that relate to the wider objectives of the company?
I'm not sure. Could you
so
maybe
for example,
the question?
for example, you're managing your processes within the realm or domain of revenue operations, but maybe you're speaking to a team who are not in RevOps. Maybe it's, I don't know, the CFO or the legal team or the VP of sales who has their own agenda, KPIs, tasks to take care of.
Yeah.
What does that handshake or that relationship look like for you? How do you oil that? How do you get it all to work together for one common purpose?
Right. Yeah. So that's important. And one of the most basic things that you could do is set up time to meet with these people because you have to communicate with them. And sometimes Slack is not enough. And I know we're in this sort of hybrid state and we're on Zoom a lot, but you have to like actually talk to people face to face, whether you get to be in an office or not, because Slack can be misinterpreted when people are really fast and they're typing and they can ignore their Slack. So setting up some time on a cadence to have a sync with the different departments that revenue operations touch, which is something I do, and bringing projects from other functional areas to the person and say, hey, we have this project and it actually touches your area. This is how it's going to impact you. Is there anything else that we need to consider? How else do you want to be involved? Like bringing that communication piece. And I could go back to this like sort of lead routing inbound process that we were talking about earlier, where what's happened before is two different teams using the same data set. They're using our leads and they're reporting on different definitions of what like an SQL is, for example. So they're working in their groups, and revenue operations is here, new in, getting set up with everything, and both sides are like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with our system because look at this report I have, it says one thing, and this report I have says another thing. It's the same data. It's actually the same report. There are just different filters on it. So technically, nothing is wrong with the system and nothing is incorrect like in the report. It's just that these two teams were literally not using the same definition of this metric. That is a very important metric that bubbles up to the executive team. So we all get together on a Zoom and we're like, okay, here's how this person has been reporting and on this, and this is why. Here's how this person has been reporting on this, and this is why. Do you want to change the definition? Do we want to use that definition? Do we want to use this one? And so it took, you know, like 30, 45, an hour of talking and discussion. And you walk away with, all right, we're going to use this way to report on it. So now, if you want to go and make your own report, just know you should use the filters so that you get this result. Otherwise, you may have something different. That's like a very overly simplified version example.
Very cool. And then another thought that you shared with me was the perception or maybe even the misconception that RevOps are kind of order takers and administrative people. You probably said it in a better way than that, but something to that feeling or effect. How do you see the role of the RevOps team and leaders within the company?
Yeah, so I think there is this misconception that RevOps, you're either a support team, let's just give you a ticket, can you just fix this bug? Or you're just a system admin. Can you build me something in Salesforce? Can you automate this? And while those are components of the job, and if you're one person, definitely, if you're a team of one, you should probably understand those things. But it's not all that revenue operations is. If we go back to like, okay, that process thing, who would have caught that? The team's still doing their own thing in their silos, and then they come up to the C-level and they're like, okay, I have this report, all of the board numbers are wrong, what's wrong with our system? But then you have, instead of that happening, you have this person who's like, let's get together, let's define it, let's write it down, let's put it somewhere where we can reference it later in case we forget, because we're really busy people and we have a lot going on and we can forget things, which is okay. But now we have a document to reference because someone thought like, hey, we need to document this. We need to document what happens when we need to do a mass data update, because there are a lot of steps involved and there are some data points that you need, and there's a certain time frame that you need to get that done in. So let's have that process also documented. And so revenue operations practitioners and leaders are not just system admins. We're not just, let's fix this bug. We actually can be more prescriptive in our work and for the team if people change their idea about what it is a little bit.
How do you see that role evolving maybe over the next 12 months? Because it is, in the bigger scheme of things, it still is a newer role. Hope you don't kind of feel offended by me saying that, but still it is. Ratio-wise, I can say there's less revenue operations people than there is sales operations. You know, if you were to search LinkedIn right now, that would be true. So I'll say that it is perhaps a newer role. I'd say that the definition and the scope of the role is still being defined, explored, expanded. How do you see that expanding or evolving over the next 12 months? What does that look like in your mind?
Yeah, so I think that this revenue operations sort of popped up this last year or so. As I've noticed, we've been in this pandemic state and at home and on LinkedIn more. So I'm seeing like a lot more content around this, right? And it's seemingly a lot of sales ops rebranded as RevOps. So I think that's the first thing, is people want to get on the RevOps sort of, I think bandwagon is maybe not an appropriate word, like revolution, maybe do something. And so they put these postings out there and it's okay, we want a RevOps person, but what they're really looking for is a sales ops person. So I think over the next 12 months, we're going to see hopefully a little bit more of a decoupling of those things. Because if you want to have a RevOps person, then that person is going to be focused on not just one functional area. It's going to be the whole revenue engine. It's going to be marketing, sales, customer success, maybe probably product as well. And so I think we'll start to see a divergence of those things a little bit more, because sales ops is important. All of those different functional pieces are important, but RevOps sitting at the top can sort of align, to use one of these buzzwords in the community these days, to align all of those groups together to like under the same goal, which is support the revenue teams and what they do to bring in more revenue. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of that. And the RevOps person is probably going to be more of a leader in a leadership role over those functional groups. Now, if you're a small company, obviously, like I'm one person, I can't have a team of an individual sales ops and marketing ops and CS ops person. So I have to do all of those things in for me. But hopefully, as companies start to see the value, as we can start to show what revenue operations is, why it's different from just like these technical pieces, companies will understand that and they'll say, okay, we actually need to have a team. So we need 3 people. RevOps needs to be a department. Well, we're not going to hire just one person at a time. We're going to say, okay, here's this person, go build your team, similar to sales or marketing.
I guess as the team builds out, the shift will be in parallel, moving from tactical tasks to strategic thinking, right? There'll be more capacity for that when there's more hands in the kitchen.
Exactly. It's very mentally taxing to switch back and forth between those two things
in the same day. Sometimes in the same meeting.
Yes, like from personal experience, and it takes a lot of focus and like organization to keep things moving, I would say. But it like mentally switching from like the tactical stuff to the strategic thinking, the high level thinking is a lot. It takes a lot. So I'm optimistic that organizations will realize that revenue operations can be both tactical and strategic when you have a team, and the value of that. So 12 months is not far away.
No, I guess, you know, when we kind of pull it back to the GTM theme that you started with there, is it's hard to be super strategic when you go into market. You're doing a lot of testing, execution, building, and being strategic is somewhat of a luxury unless you have enough data to really have a deep level of reflection and insights. Like at some point you're creating the data by going to market. Then you do that for long enough, you can probably look backwards and say, this is what we've learned.
Well,
what do you think about that?
I think there's some truth to that, but I think that you still have to, like, because a strategy is a plan. So even if you can have a plan, you take that plan, you go. Something has to change. All right, we're back to the drawing board, or like iterate a little bit and use maybe as sort of to use an agile framework or analogy. You can iterate on your plan, but you still have to have one. You still have to know what your goal is. And so in that sense, I think you're still going to be doing strategy. You can't just go and do stuff. Like you have to know what you're doing the stuff for. You want to go to market. What is the goal of that? First, go to market motion, acquire 100 customers. Okay, great. How are we going to do that? A, B, C. Okay, great. Now we go do it. We get our data, like we were going and we're doing it. A, B, C is the steps, and we have multiple steps under that. Those are all the tactical things. Gathering the data, then you come back and do a post-mortem and say, okay, all right, what was successful? What can we do differently, or what can we do better? Or do we still want to do this? We still have the same goal or not? So I think that's how strategy and tactics work together. But I don't think that just because you're small or young or don't have enough young in company years, that you shouldn't do strategy, or that you would not be doing strategy. You will, and maybe you just don't think of it because It's another one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, strategy is like a long-term sort of thing. We can't focus on it right now.
Is there such a thing as agile strategy in your mind?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. I think that strategy is just, you know what your goal is. How are you going to accomplish that goal? Like at a high level. And then you think, okay, my goal is to acquire 100 customers next month. How are we going to do that? We need to hire one salesperson. We need to have a place to intake all of the data. We need to make sure our product is ready. So those are the three things. And then everything else that you do should align to those things. And then if something that you're doing that you think, okay, I think this is going to be important, this is going to help us get one of those three or top objectives to get to that goal. If something happens where you have to change really quickly, okay, you can do that. All right, everybody, we actually need to rethink this piece. Let's do it, decide, and then get back to it.
Very cool. So Asia, to summarize, what is the key takeaway that you want to leave with us in terms of go-to-market operations and how to get it right from a RevOps point of view? I think you shared a lot of good insights there, but what's the core golden nugget you want to leave us with?
Start early. Start early, and don't be afraid to start early with the RevOps organization person. It can be one person. Bring on a generalist. And focus on taking a catalog or inventory of your go-to-market processes. Then look at your systems, how they're designed to support those processes, and then how are those supporting the people. And then if you have some gaps, start to iterate, start to say, hey, here's a proposed solution. Let's get everyone together. Let's agree on it. And then let's go execute. And then constantly change if we need to.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, Asia, thank you so much for being an awesome guest here on the RevAmp podcast show. I'll encourage anybody that listens to this who has more questions for you specifically, just to reach out on LinkedIn and feel free to ask you and to learn from you and your experience set. And we look forward to staying in touch and seeing the continued journey of Postal.io and of course yourself over the next 12 months and seeing how you guys grow as a team together.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Thank you, Asia.